Hello, folks. Can anybody hear me? Apparently I'm live. So it tells me. I am indeed not currently recording. Aha, I am live and I have people watching. Hello, people watching. Good afternoon. How many of you here are here for some cool Unreal content? Or at least watching me muddle through trying to record some. It's Sam, by the way, person recording. As you can see from the bottom of the screen, I am in fact not recording though, currently. I am just faffing about trying to get ready to record. I had a really weird audio issue earlier with OBS, so I've finally managed to sort it out with a mixture of various tweaks and so on. Finally back to being able to actually produce something and able to get you guys to hear me. So hopefully that is all good. Good point. The title is confusing. I will now change it. Has that come up? Does it now say Sam producing videos live? I hope so. Excellent. So that is all up to date. Maybe I should change it to something more generic, because otherwise it's going to be a problem when Ben starts recording that it will actually say the wrong person. Okay, so what I'm doing today is recording a video on physical gun architecture in Unreal. So the idea being, how do you architect your Unreal projects to have a gun, and how does it play animations, how does it do all that sort of thing. So that's what you guys are here for today, like it or not, or at least what you're going to be listening to. So it's, yes, Unreal, not Unity. It's not RPG content. If you guys are used to watching Ben producing RPG content, it's not that. It is some Unreal content that goes into the last section of Unreal, Testing Grounds section, and we're building a first-person shooter. So if you want to hang around and see some of that, then please do, and I will be stopping to ask for questions about midway through. And hopefully, if you guys have got any questions and you can give me any feedback, that would be absolutely fantastic, and I can incorporate it into the second half of the video. So we'll, have, hopefully together with a bit of teamwork, created a really cool and awesome video. Yes, Unreal and C++. Well, at the moment we're just doing Blueprint, but yes, Stephen, if you want to hang around and just have a look and see what it looks like, then please don't run away screaming. Just keep your mind open and see what we're creating here. So I'm just going looking for a resource that I knew I had put into one of my Git commits earlier. An Unreal style guide, which I haven't been following to the letter. Naughty me, slap on the wrist. That is a long style guide. Okay. Dan M, I would never have been able to tell from your username that you're Dan M. I guess it's Dan in there somewhere. Thanks for the style guide, by the way, Dan. It is great and very in-depth. I hope it doesn't make people run away, though, because it's very long. Anyway, I'll do my best. Okay, people on the live stream, I am going to start recording. So first things first, I want to take you over this new style in which I'm going to be doing this particular lecture. So here in front of me is a text document with my to-do list for the lecture. And you can see at the bottom, we've got a bar with a little icon in the left-hand corner, the GameDev.tv icon. In fact, that's what that is. And what you'll see coming up at the bottom is that as I remove items from my checklist, you'll see the current item on the checklist and what we're doing. So this will be really handy for you if you want to come back to a video at any point in the future and just want to find a certain part of the video. Then you can just scroll through and see where the bar changes and see where you can start taking that content again. So the first thing, the first item on our to-do list is to have a look at our style guide. We've seen style guides in the past. We've had that in a wiki on the Unreal wiki, but the eminent and fantastic Dan M has given us this style guide here, linked in the resources on GitHub. And this style guide is very in-depth. It tells us how to name all sorts of assets, blueprints, and so on. I do suggest having a good read of it. It is quite long, so don't let that scare you, but take a little bit of time, take a little bit to read it. The main idea is that you have the asset name and some prefixes and postfixes that depend on the type of the asset. So if it's a texture, it'll have one prefix. If it's a blueprint, it'll be one prefix. If it's an animation blueprint, it'll be yet another blueprint prefix. And what I'm going to do is go through and rename just a couple of things that we're going to be touching in this lecture. But first, if you get this error message when opening up your project for the first time, after having created build data and having ignored that build data, then the likelihood is you may just have wiped that build data by checking out some files or something else. And Unreal's just giving you a little bit of a warning there, but you can happily ignore that warning for now. Okay, so we're going to dive right in to have a look at what we're going to be changing this lecture. So I'm going to take a look at my to-do list. We're doing an overview of the architecture of our gun. So let's have a look at what is touched by that gun architecture. So we'll go into my dynamic folder, weapons, FP gun, behavior. That's the first place to start. Now, what am I going to rename all of these to? Well, the first thing would be to rename the gun to the new style, which is actually going to be prefixed with BP because it's a blueprint, BP underscore gun. The first person projectile is going to have the same treatment applied to it, so rename that first person projectile to BP underscore, and the same for fire component. There we have it. So that folder is done. I'm going to go back up a few levels, back up to dynamic. In dynamic, I want to touch on the character blueprint, which is also involved in firing, obviously. So we go down to character, behavior, and we've got character here. I want to rename that to BP character, all in keeping with our guide, with our style guide. And finally, the animations are involved. So here we've got the TP animation. That's totally out of style guide. What I'm going to go for is ABP, that means animation blueprint. And it's now redundant to say animation because it's already an ABP, that should be clear. So ABP underscore TP is what I'm going to call it. Nice and straightforward. And to be consistent, I'm going to do the same thing to the first person animation blueprint. So I'm going to rename that to ABP FP, first person. So those two are very nice and clear. And you can see what's happening here is that as I'm renaming, using this naming convention, because of the alphabetic sorting here in the content browser, I am able to see things of a similar type grouped together. I find that quite handy. Okay, we've got a first person fire animation montage here as well. So I'm going to go and have a look because I can't remember off the top of my head in the style guide what that's called. It's under the animations section and it's an animation montage. So the prefix is AM. So I'm going to rename that to AM underscore. And it's first person montage, first person fire montage. So I'm actually going to rename that to use FP, that prefix we're using here. So AM FP fire. Okay, so now that's quite clear that it's both an animation montage and it's a firing animation montage for the first person. Okay, so we've renamed all those folders. They're now all consistent. I can go back into my checklist and remove that from the checklist. Next thing that I want to show you guys is the problems in our existing gun architecture and how the animation is basically a mess, for want of a better word. So let's take a look at that. So the current gun animation architecture is as follows. We've got three main components involved, the newly named ABP underscore TP, the third person animation blueprint, the character blueprint, and the fire component blueprint. Now, along the bottom, I'm going to have time as the axis. So what we're showing you in this diagram is how these objects are interacting over time. And I've got these little red grid lines in here to show us the frame boundaries, basically. So every time there's a frame, we've got one of these ticks. So that's happening over time at a fixed period. In actual fact, a frame rate is obviously variable, but we'll just for simplicity say that it's a fixed period. Okay, so what's happening every frame? The animation blueprint is querying the character blueprint for whether it's shooting or not. And the character blueprint is responding, in this case with a red arrow, just to indicate that it's not shooting, that we got a false Boolean value come back. Then we get a green arrow come back. When a green arrow comes back, it's time to start that shooting animation. So it plays the fire animation. And as long as we get the response of true coming back from the BP character, we're going to keep playing that firing animation and progress, play the next frame of that animation, basically put the actor in that pose. When we get red back, that's when we stop the firing animation. Now, independently of this, in certain frames of that fire animation, we have got fire notifications coming out of it. And those fire notifications are coming up to the character blueprint and being forwarded on to the fire component, which is then responsible for spawning a projectile, potentially making some sound, and so on. And this can happen periodically, depending on the speed of that animation, depending on the loop rate or whether it loops at all. It's going to be rapid firing the fire component. So there are a few problems with this architecture as it currently stands. The first thing is that it's centralized on the fire animation. That's just a little bit weird because in order to change the firing rate, we need to change the rate of the animation. We just can't swap out a rapid fire weapon with a shotgun, for example, or a rifle that isn't rapid fire. That's not going to be very easy in this current architecture, and something that we might want to do. Or for example, if we want our AI to fire 3 times and then stop, it's currently very hard because we'd have to keep track of how many fire notifiers we've had and then stop responding with shooting. It's just all the wrong way around, in my opinion, and it's not very physical. The second problem is that we've got the ABP TP at the center of this. Now, we know that we've got also a first-person animation blueprint, and they both work on the BP character. So why is the third-person blueprint central to all of this when we've also got a first-person blueprint? Where does that factor in? How can that not be controlling the firing rate? And it's just weird. So the other problem is that we've got the third-person animation blueprint here at the center. And then the third problem is that we've got a fire component. So a fire component is a very non-physical component, and the reason we have this is because we had two gun meshes, so we needed something to abstract away that actual firing point and where the projectiles are going to be spawned from. But going forward, we're going to look at how we can go back to a more of a physical analogy and reparent that gun depending on whether you're possessed or not. Okay, so let's have a look at the improved architecture now. Okay, guys, I'm going to open up for some questions there because that was a bit of a handful. So I would like to check that everything is understandable there, and that would be great. So just speak up and let me know whether that slide makes any sense whatsoever. Any feedback at all, guys, would be welcome. And I'm going to go and grab a drink of water. Well, that's fantastic news, Stephen. English, English. Are you referring to the way I speak or the way I write? I'm not sure you'd be saying that about the way I write. Hello, Mikey. You seem to be my #1 fan. You're on all my live streams. Well, if we've got no major objections from anybody, I'm looking at you, Dan M. Then I will proceed on and show you guys the improved architecture. But before I do that, I need to remember to go and remove that checklist item because we've overviewed the problems, and we're going to have a look at that improved gun-centric architecture where we put the physical gun at the center of everything. So the time still remains here on my diagram. At the center of all of it is going to be our BP gun and our BP character. And these are the two components that are going to be communicating now, which makes sense. So the gun is going to be querying the character for whether the trigger is down, not whether it's shooting, because that's not really a thing that the character does. The character pulls the trigger on the gun. That's a much more physical analogy, at least in my opinion. So we've got that. It's querying every tick whether the trigger is down. Now, we could talk about maybe doing a notification-based architecture, but for now, we'll stick with a trigger-down kind of architecture where it goes, oh, is the trigger down, is the trigger down, is the trigger down? And when it says yes, when the trigger is down, that is when we go ahead and spawn a projectile into the world, give it some velocity, and perhaps also add a sound or something like that. And then what we can do here is in the gun, in the logic of the gun, depending on whether it's a rifle or a rapid fire kind of weapon or it's a shotgun, we can specify a different wait time between the triggers down. So maybe we might even say that you need to release the trigger before you're allowed to shoot again, or we say that the waiting time between them is specified in the gun. That makes a lot more sense to me. The gun is the thing that tells us how rapidly we can fire when we pull the trigger. That's just common sense, really. And then what we have is once we've spawned a projectile, the gun can be the one responsible for notifying, perhaps through the character, that we need to animate the player. And this then can create animations both for the third-person meshes and for the first-person meshes at the same time. So that's a much better architecture, wouldn't you say? Okay, so it's going to be challenge time up next, and you're going to stop hearing me waffle on about the architecture, and we are going to be getting you guys to go ahead and reinstate that gun actor. Okay, so you've had the gun actor before, we've had that BP gun before, and we went away towards our, what was it called, the firing component architecture, because we wanted to have the mesh separate. So what we're going to do is going to go back towards the gun, and the way we're going to do it is the following. So I would like you to have that gun there as a child actor. It needs to be childed to the first person arms only at this point. We're not going to be worried about the fact that the third person is going to look weird and the gun's going to be floating around in midair. For now, we're just going to be worried about it looking right in the first person's arms. And in the next lecture, we'll look at how we can reparent and move that gun around depending on which viewpoint we're in, whether we are possessing the player or not possessing the player. The fire component should be removed entirely. I don't want it in the loop anymore. I want us to be doing all the firing through the FP gun. And then I want both the AI and player able to shoot. So you need to be able to hook up those mechanisms that were previously going through the fire component to the AI and player. And if you can do these 3 steps, then that is the challenge complete, and you don't have to worry about how you've achieved those 3 steps. You don't have to do it exactly the same way as me. The important thing is that you meet these criteria. So pause the video and have a go at that. Hey guys, so over in the live chat, I'm just going to put in the not recording here. What do you think of that challenge? Does it sound like something that's doable? Is that something that you want to go away and have a go at right now if you are Unreal people? Or if you're at this stage in the course? You may not be, which is perfectly reasonable. But does it sound doable? Irresistible Jelly, you just paused the live stream. Good for you. You're literally listening to all my instructions and going right in there. That's fantastic. But the challenge sounds reasonable to you, does it? Obviously, when I'm asking that, I'm asking people who are at this stage in the course. If you're not at this stage in the course of never touched Unreal, then don't worry, I'm really not talking to you about this, but just, whether it sounds like a kind of reasonable challenge. If it sounds completely off whack, then let me know as well. Just stop the recording there so I know where to resume when I'm editing. Definitely achievable. Fantastic, Irresistible Jelly. You're amazing. Yes, Refraction, we are rather far into the course now. How many hours of content is it? Quite a few hours of content, so people are probably quite content with challenging challenges. At least I hope so, because that's what I'm giving them. Okay, so I'm going to go back to challenge doing. Yes, Stephen, there is heavy polling going on, but then generally in a game architecture, there tends to be a lot of heavy polling because you have stuff going on every tick. If you had anything like that was I/O bound, then polling is generally not a good idea because you're overusing the CPU. But if you are in an architecture which is basically CPU bound, then polling's kind of not such a bad thing. It's a bit weird, but that's just one of the quirks of developing games. But you could, as I said, do it in an event-based architecture as well. So when a trigger is pulled, you send a message to the gun saying trigger down, and it does all the spawning and so on that you need to do. Thanks for pointing that out, Irresistible Jelly. I will make sure that that's corrected, but seeing as you guys are on here now, I'm not going to kick you. But in future, I guess we'll make sure that those live streams are visible only to those who are premium subscribers, and hopefully this has been a nice taster for you guys if you are not a premium subscriber. Funny, my settings do say that it should require a paid subscription to view, so somehow you guys are incredibly lucky. Yes, so you are the lucky few, the people who helped us raise the numbers. Okay, I said I was going to get back to the challenge. That's what I'm going to do. You guys are distracting me. No, I'm only kidding. I'm going to start the recording again. Okay, welcome back. So let's dive into this challenge solution. I'm going to go up to my Unreal Editor. And where should we start? So the first things first, I want to make sure that we've got a child actor on the FP arms. So I'm going to, for that, go up to Dynamic Character Behavior and then to BP Character. So let's get the character blueprint open. Wait for that to load. Twiddle our thumbs a little bit. And here it is. So I'm going to, as I said, entirely remove that fire component. I do not want it anymore. And if I go to my viewport, you can also see we've got a couple of meshes for the gun. We've got our FP gun mesh here. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. I'm also going to go ahead and delete the TP gun, because the only gun I want is our gun blueprint in the first person's arms. So I'm going to select the FP arms, go to add component, and then search for the child actor component. So that's a component which spawns a child actor, as we know, and I'm going to call it the gun actor instead. And what's the gun actor class going to be? Well, I'm going to go over to the details and look at child actor class, search for gun, and now you'll see previously when we had two guns show up, it was ambiguous which one we had to choose. But now with Dan Marshall's fantastic naming convention, we have BP_gun, and we know that it's the blueprint, we know that it's the one we want, and that's disambiguated it completely. So that gun mesh has now showed up, but it's in completely a weird location. So if we select that gun, we should be able to reset its location somehow. I think the way we need to do it is by setting a parent socket. So I'm going to go to the search glass, the looking glass next to the parent socket, look for the grip point, and hopefully that's going to put it right into our first person's hand. It looks promising. I'm going to compile, save, and go into our scene. Oh, we've got an issue. We've got an issue that the blueprint won't compile, and if I take a look at that log error, it is because I'm calling fire. Well, I'm going to have to replace that later, but let's just remove it for now, so we won't be doing any firing just now. There's no firing hooked up, but everybody has guns. They're trying to shoot at me, but no bullets are coming out because fire is not being called. So of our challenge, it looks like we have completed the first item. We have completed the second item, removing the fire component, but the AI and player being able to shoot, that is not currently working. So let's go back to our BP character and see what we can do in this fire notification method. So the thing I want to be doing in here, I right click and I want to get hold of the actor of that gun actor. So I'm going to pull the gun actor into my blueprint graph. From that gun actor, I am going to get the child actor component somehow. So I'm going to get actor or something like that. Get child actor, that's the one I want. The child actor, unfortunately, is just an actor type, so I'm going to have to cast this to a BP gun. So cast to underscore BP underscore gun rather. And with this BP gun, I can now call the method that I want, which is fire. In fact, it's called on fire in particular. And I'm going to hook up execution flow through the fire node to the cast node. Compile, save that, and hit play. And let's start playing again. So if I back off, is being held in the first person's arms, which is not quite right, but we'll fix that sooner or later. But at least it's gun-centric again, and we have this physical gun analogy, or at least slightly. So this is at least the first step towards a more sane architecture, and in the following videos we are going to get there completely, start re-architecting things, and hopefully moving some more blueprint into C++. So I will see you there. And just to reiterate what we have done, let's go back and see what all the changes were. The first thing we did was rename to the new styling convention. We also had a look at the problems of our existing architecture and how it was all centered around the third-person animation blueprint, which was just weird. We looked at how we can improve this with more of a gun-centric architecture, and we made the first step by reinstating the gun actor. And in following lectures, we're going to be doing more. So I will see you in those lectures. Okay, so that pretty much wraps the video. I'm just going to do an introduction to that video showing what we did and what you guys already saw. Yes, you're right, Stephen. Drag and drop blueprint, drag and drop C++ doesn't look so scary. It's really funny because people are scared away by the syntax of programming languages when actually the blueprint there is just about as complex as C++, and it can do pretty much everything it does. And if you understand blueprint, you pretty much can understand C++. So there's really nothing to be scared about. Basically, that's what I'm saying. Yes, Dioli, it is a testing grounds video. Welcome to Physical Gun Architecture. In this video, what are we going to be getting up to? Well, we're going to look at this style guide provided to us by the Dan M of the forums and the Q&A, and we are going to be looking at how we can do a few of these modifications to some of our assets, not all of our assets, but we're going to go ahead and rename a few. And then when we've done that, we are going to go in and re-architect how our gun works, and how we're going to go back to having a gun actor and doing things like calling fire on the gun and centering things around that once again. So without further ado, let's go and create a more sane gun architecture so that we can do cool things like having rapid fire weapons and having shotguns and so on, and let our imagination run wild with guns and all sorts of cool firing things and weapons. So let's dive in. Okay, so I'm going to sign off, guys, and go and edit that video. Thank you very much for being my audience, and a fantastic audience at that. So I hope you enjoyed watching this behind the scenes recording, and I will catch you on the flip side.